It's time to ignite your soul and unlock your full potential. Join us on Beneath the Helmet, the podcast exploring firefighters' health and wellness. Hosted by retired Fire Chief Arjuna George, our podcast is the perfect place to start your journey towards becoming the best version of yourself. So come on, let's join the conversation and find out what sets your soul on fire.
All right, everyone, welcome back. I got a very special episode today. I get the unique opportunity to have an interview with three individuals who are involved in this amazing new documentary coming out October 3rd. I got a chance to connect with Keith Hanks, who many of you may know from the first responder world. He's a firefighter. He's also been on my podcast, and I've been on his podcast a few times. We've connected over the years. Amazing individual who's definitely an advocate for first responder mental health. I also got a chance to meet with Corey and Scott, producer, writer for this amazing documentary, First Responders in Crisis. This documentary will be released October 3rd, 2023. But as you'll see in this episode, there's a very special announcement that September 27th, which is tomorrow, today is the 26th of September, the 27th, there will be a pre-sale of this documentary, and this will be available on iTunes only. So iTunes only, September 27th. You can get a real special deal, pre-sale on this amazing documentary. I had the privilege to watch this pre-release. It is very, it's emotional. It's very heart-centered. Definitely, you feel what these first responders went through. And you also see that there's hope at the end of it, which I think is the most important part. So you'll see the tragedy that these individuals went through, but also how they're coping in today's life. So I hope you enjoyed this interview with these three amazing individuals, and be sure to check out this documentary. Once again, October 3rd, being released officially, but pre-sale on iTunes, September 27th, 2023. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and until next time, stay well.
I think my second fire was a fatal fire. That's 18 years old, getting off the truck. Didn't think any of it then, but I can still remember that day.
It was a 4-year-old girl who was struck by a car. She was dragged 62 feet. Her whole family was there.
Death, dismemberment, heartache. A routine day for us was somebody's worst day.
You see bad accidents, and I'm not trying to be a tough guy. You try to get ready for it, but you never really are. This stuff will stay with you in your mind.
You're a firefighter. You're supposed to go out and help everybody, and the problem is, it's like, who helps us?
I remember screaming, and I pressed it against my head. Then I just pulled the trigger, and it clicked.
Our mental health system is so broken, and it is even more broken for the first responder community.
One-on-one should be to sit down and talk. We're gonna make sure everyone's okay, because you need to take care of the people that are taking care of everyone.
All right, welcome back, everyone. I got a very special episode on Beneath the Helmet today. I got the producers and one of the main characters, definitely a good name to represent Keith, from First Responders in Crisis documentary that's coming out very shortly, I believe, this October. So we have Corey Moss, we have Scott, and we got Keith joining us this podcast episode. So welcome to the show, boys. And I just want to start with maybe Corey, maybe just a quick little introduction of yourself and what brought you to where you are today, filming this documentary and getting this out into the hands of first responders and the world in general.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having us on your podcast. It's an honor. We're excited to be talking about this film, which comes out almost exactly a month from today. And, it's been a long journey for us. We shot this kind of at the tail end of COVID, and, it took a long time to put it together and find the right way to get it out to the world. So it's finally here and it feels good. I'm a writer, director, producer here in LA. I've been doing that for over 20 years. I've worked for places like MTV and AMC and some digital companies like Yahoo and Hearst, and had my own company for about 7 years. And we've made a bunch of scripted and unscripted projects. I've always been in the documentary space. I made my first documentary when I was a young 20 something, working for MTV. And then Scott and I have been working together on a few projects in recent years. And we met through a mutual love of football, of all things. And but also both have a lot of same characteristics in the Hollywood business, just a tremendous hustle, if you will. And so this is we worked on a few things together, and a few years ago, Scott called me and said, I saw this thing on my Facebook feed from someone I went to high school with. Check it out. And it was something that Keith had posted. It was a really heartfelt post. And Scott said, I think there's something here. And I agreed. So we set up a Zoom with Keith and kind of heard his story. And that was our entry point into the movie.
Fantastic. Yeah, I was wondering how that connection happened there between you, both of you and Keith. So that's nice. Thank you. Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Appreciate obviously having us on, like Corey had mentioned. So my background, I've been a pro college and high school football coach for almost 25 years. It's the acting world fell into my life. I was coaching at Harvard and resigned out of the blue, drove out to LA probably about 18 years ago, and have sort of never left. Coached high school football out here while pursuing acting, got into the producing world, and then most recently spent the last 4 years on the football staff at UCLA while working as an actor, producer. Been lucky to be on some cool TV shows over the last couple of years, and went to high school with Keith. Keith was a year behind me. And ironically, how this really, like Corey had alluded to, there was a post, but Keith had tagged me in a bullying post. And I'm like, man, I don't remember bullying anybody, but I got to reach out to this guy because he just publicly tagged me in a bullying post, and that's concerning to me. So I reached out. I said, hey, man, hope all's well. I just saw you tagged me in a bullying podcast. You wanted to fill me in? Did I have a bad day? And he wrote back. He's like, no. He's like, actually, you were one of the only people that treated me like a human. And I'm like, wow, that's sad. I'm just like sort of taken back by it. And then I sort of dove into Keith's story a little bit and then reached out to him. Like Corey said, Keith put together a little deal, sent it to me, and I was blown away by what he's gone through. And, Corey and I had been doing some things, and obviously respect the way Corey handles his business. Sent it to him, and he was like, there's something here. And the journey to get from that point to here was a process. It was obviously very entertaining, some highs, some lows, but one of the coolest things I've been a part of, and very excited for the world to see it.
Well, that's quite the story. I'm glad it was a non-bullying post, and you were one of the kind human.
Yeah, I will say also, I'd like, mental health has been a topic, I think, for maybe the last decade or something. It always intrigued me, but it became very real in my life in the last few years. I watched a really close family member have a breakdown. I started having anxiety attacks and doing therapy for the first time. And I think, like probably the four of us and a lot of your audience, like there was a lot of stigma attached to things like therapy and even just admitting that you're struggling with something with mental health. So I think it was within me that I wanted to, use my skill set to tell, an important story in mental health. And, the universe, brought us Keith. And so I'm really grateful for that because, I think it's been a really interesting way into this topic, through first responders. But to me, the story is, it's bigger than that. It's the fight for more awareness for mental health in general. So,
yeah, couldn't agree more. That's great, and that's what the whole object of your documentary, these podcasts, the books out there. Yeah, it's about spreading that word and smashing that stigma and letting people talk about it more openly and without any shame attached to it. So our social media, Scott? This all started from a social media
Yeah.
post.
Yeah. And, again, it's just so interesting. Well, obviously where Keith and I are from, it's just a small town, community. And I think that's what, makes it even more enjoyable, being able to go home in a couple weeks to screen this for the people back home and bring Corey back to where Keith and I grew up. And I think that was, one of the coolest things about filming it. Obviously, there's some unbelievable people in this, but we ended this with a dinner with everybody, breaking bread and actually having human, heartfelt conversations. And obviously, I've been around the world. I've met a lot of people in both professions I've been in, but to meet the people and the subjects of this documentary that Keith connected us with, I think the world will really truly connect with these folks and realize that, there's no, mental health, regardless of what form it comes in, it doesn't discriminate. And you're going to see just what appear to be very normal people going through some really tough times. So to be able to be around those people firsthand really opened my eyes to, like Corey said, I think we've all gone through some things, but when you're around people that have openly talked about it, you really start to have some hope that this country, this world can be a better place by being around people that, want to help and share some of the things they've gone through to change some other people's lives in a good way.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Keith, we've had you on the show before. Our audience probably is familiar with you, but maybe just a little snapshot and maybe cover how the spark started. So that blog post, the kind of the birth of this documentary.
Yeah, it's been a journey, that's for sure. And, growing up in this world of, fire and military, I knew I was destined to be on the job, which I did for 21 years before, my own PTSD, basically crippled my career and I left. And before I left the job, as you know, and, Corey and Scott know, I had already started advocating for, mental health and getting the word out and being able to talk about this stuff. And, the idea of doing a film never popped in my head. Matter of fact, when me and Scott really first started talking about this after that quote unquote bullying post, and I'll go on record, Scott was not a bully. All right. So anyone listening, Scott wasn't a bully. It was
He is now. He wasn't.
He is now. Yeah. High school,
Definitely.
he wasn't. Now he's a pushy kind of guy. But, honestly, I was like, hey, can we make like an infomercial? I had no idea it would be like a film. And to go from my roots and everything I had been through to thinking maybe we'll make like a 60-second little snapshot video or something for people to watch to a full length feature film, essentially. It was humbling, and to be part of the production of it, to see friends and family who were part of this, people I've worked with over the years, sit down and talk about their darkest moments, their most vulnerable moments in front of a camera, knowing that this is going to get out in front of hopefully millions of people, was an experience like you can't really describe it. It's one of those, like Scott and Corey both said, it's a human connection moment where I never thought I'd experience something like that. And I did. And I am so grateful for being part of that. That to me alone makes this whole journey worth every minute of it. The waiting. I mean, I always allude to, I wasn't expecting it to take this long. I wasn't expecting, the wait that comes with Hollywood stuff, but it kind of the same as like EMS and fire. You wait, and then all of a sudden there's a change, right? It's very, very similar to that. So that was sort of, I was comfortable with that to a point, but here we are, in 3 weeks time, 3.5 weeks time, we're going to be showing this back home, in our hometown, honestly, and in the school that me and Scott both graduated from, which is really cool.
So this will be open to the public, or is this to the school itself?
It'll be open to the public. Yeah, we're obviously catering to first responders and their families, but it will be open to the public. And we got to iron out the details on how that'll be done. But it's a very big theater. It holds quite a few people, so we're hopeful to maybe not fill it to capacity, but definitely have a big crowd there, so we can get word out even more.
Fantastic. Well, I am very I wouldn't say excited. I would say happy that you posted that blog post
Hmm.
a year ago or so, whatever that time was, and initiated and sparked this birth of this documentary. Because I truly feel that your story alone, as well as all the others, is going to make a huge impact in the community for sure.
It's weird. It's weird how stars align.
Mhm.
I mean, me and Scott have known each other probably 30 years now, and it's, we've never really been like pen pals, but it's always been something where I think if 10 years ago I reached out to Scott, he would have answered, same on my end. And it just so happened to work out that, this is where it got us. So it's really cool. It's really a cool story.
Very cool.
Yeah, I think the timing of it was serendipitous because obviously just with the post and how Scott and Keith reconnected, but the us being able to make the film, Scott and I both having availability in our schedules because of COVID. It's a very intimate movie. So, we had a crew of 4, which is sort of unheard of for a documentary. And, so I think, it was kind of the perfect movie to do. I think people were feeling very isolated from having been in COVID for, over a year at that point, or right around a year, I think it was when we shot. So, I think everyone was a little extra vulnerable in a good way. And, I think that all contributed a bit to to the powerful tone of the movie.
Yeah, the vulnerability and the honesty that you probably saw, right? Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I'd love to go like kind of behind the scenes. How was it to interact with these first responders? How did you find them? Which ones did you select? What was the process going through that? And then maybe like how did that actual interview go behind the scenes? Was it
Well,
on site? Did you bring people to you,
you
or
know, I,
did you?
the,
Uh,
the original, entry point into this was Keith. And, I think we knew right away that, anytime you do a documentary, you're going to do, most of the time, I should say, uh, you're going to bring in other sources to, in a large effect to talk about your main subject. So we were always going to interview a lot of people. But I think we realized that, these people had stories of their own. And so I think we found a way to keep Keith at the center of it, but also include everyone else's stories. And they're a wide variety of people and a wide variety of stories. And I think, so in order to do that, we utilize Keith as the link to everyone. He sent us a list of other people and we started talking and figuring out who would be the best. And then it was sort of, Keith helped us with the logistics of where we could film people. And, we wanted to obviously get people in their environment, go inside some firehouses and things like that. So, it was, we didn't have a lot of time to film and we needed to be, really smart with our time, but it all worked out really well. Like, we never felt rushed. I think at the end of the days, we were emotionally exhausted because these interviews were not easy and we would do several in the day. But, I look back and I love the people that came together, in our interview list, the characters, if you will. And I don't think like we knew, you never know if that's going to happen when you make a documentary or not. And, obviously Keith is smart and media savvy. And I think he knew, who would be good to put on camera and things like that. But we had no idea how good these incredible people would be.
Very cool. Got Keith, anything to add to that, or?
I think, it was definitely a task I was ready for, because I knew when it came down to having people talk about this, I knew who I wanted. But like Corey said, it was, I wasn't prepared for what was said, and it's what makes this so powerful. And I mean, there are parts where there is a lot of emotion, being portrayed by people who don't normally portray it, and especially in the public eye. These are people, Arjuna, as you know, and as Corey and Scott have begun to learn, we are very stoic people. And I've always been able to play that part to a T. And even still today, there's times when people have no idea how to read me. And during the filming of this, a lot of people broke that barrier down. People showed true vulnerability, true emotions, and were honest with themselves on, to be completely true in front of a camera, not knowing who's going to see this. It takes some great strength, and a lot of people really came through. And I think I know, because these are all people from my life. I've talked to them over the past, year and a half since we began filming. These are people who have made great changes in their life because of their moment in this film. People who realized that they needed to change things, or they needed to work on things, and that hit them while sitting in that seat in front of a camera. And a lot of the people in this have improved their lives because of this opportunity. And that, to me, is incredible.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and I think, just we talk about, people being willing to get vulnerable, especially men, right? It's very hard to do that. I think we've been taught that our whole lives. And, I do some speaking now, and I've talked to a lot of school administrators, coaches lately, and there's a huge fear factor around mental health, right? And, suicides, obviously, as adults and kids, and just the things that people are going through today. And I think what this film can do, and I sort of go back and use the analogy of when we grew up, there was always a bully, right? And the only way to stand up or to confront the bully was to punch him in the face, for lack of a better term. Stand up to the bully, make a stand. And I think people don't know how to combat mental health, and they're afraid of it. They want to just bring people in and check boxes, and checking boxes doesn't help people. And I think this film, I don't think there's anything more powerful, obviously, and I don't mean this in a bad way, but when a grown man fights emotion on film, it's extremely powerful, whether it's a scripted film, whether it's a documentary. And I think this film sort of attacks the bully in the room when, men and women get vulnerable. And I think, yes, we interview all adults, but I think people of all ages, this film can bring awareness to how to at least start to combat mental health and to attack the bully and the elephant in the room, which I don't think the world knows exactly how to do. And there is some fear around it. And I think the subjects in this film give people a chance to take the first steps to get the play started on how to attack the mental health problem we have in this country.
Yeah, I always, pretty much on every podcast I do, I always say that vulnerability is a superpower. And it's something that I've learned personally in the last little while, that vulnerability is a superpower. And now I just kind of mention that so people start to understand that it's not a weakness, it's actually a strength, is to be vulnerable and open to others, right? So,
Amen.
Scott, this wasn't, it just popped in my head now, but I'd love to, before we dig in too deep of other things, what's your thoughts on the fire service now versus football? Do you see any resemblance?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, both of them, it's a team atmosphere, right? I mean, obviously, running into a burning building is a little different than running down a sideline, but, I think the commonality is, whether there's 6, 7 guys on a truck or 20 guys in, the firehouse, you have 22 guys on the field relying on the guy next to you to do their job. And, obviously sports and life are very different, where, you run into a fire, you might not come out. Usually in football, if somebody makes a mistake, you play the next down. And, I tell people football has given me everything I have in my life. And it's not the games you remember, it's the lessons and the people. And I think that's what, even some of these guys, that we interviewed, they played for my dad, who was the local high school coach. So, I was a little kid when they played, and to see them now as grown men, that was really cool. But I think that, they're both situations, football and being a firefighter, you're relying on guys and girls next to you to do their job and to be there in some very rough times. And that's what, it's, again, being out of football the last couple of years and being back there reminded me of being in a locker room, which, you can't put a price tag on that.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that perspective. Thanks.
It's true.
So what were some of the biggest challenges you guys came across in producing this, filming it? Anything that kind of was the biggest challenge to you?
Probably, right away we lost a sound guy or a film guy. I mean, we're in LA and we're trying to find people in Boston, and where we shot is about an hour plus outside of the city. So, we're talking a couple days before. We didn't even know if we were going to have a camera guy, a sound guy. We lost a sound guy, randomly found, a guy with a camera that knew what he was doing. I mean, you talk about the universe just bringing more people into our lives. But I think just the logistics of being 3,000 miles away, not knowing anybody in small town that has, that could even do anything like that. But to find, the two guys that we had, it was almost a miracle.
Or you
Yeah,
were
it
saying
was.
you had 4 people in the crew. Is that a big documentary or is that a small documentary?
It's
It's
very,
4.
very, very small. Scott and we wore a ton of hats, and then, like you said, we brought in a couple of local guys who were fantastic. Even worked with our cinematographer since then on other projects. So, yeah, and I think the other big challenge for this was putting it all together in the editing process. We had hours and hours of beautiful, heartwarming, challenging interview footage, and how do we tell the story? And I think also, like, when you're taking on a subject of this emotional test, you have to be careful that you don't just depress your audience to a point where they want to turn it off.
Right.
And I think we pushed the limits of that for the first 2/3 of the movie, and I think really sort of build that. And then, really made a conscious decision for the third act of the movie to show, the happy ending, if you will, of our story, of the story of these men and women in Townsend and nearby Townsend, and not necessarily that everyone's jumping in the streets and having parades, but just that they've started to find ways to cope. And then we go through, and there's little segments on each of those ways, whether it's meditation or life coaching, or where the movie actually ends. And my favorite stuff is Brian Moran's Hilltop Farm, where he opened so that first responders and retired first responders could come and just get out of their normal lives and come and be with animals, and not a type of mental health treatment I had ever thought of. But wow, was it powerful to see. And Keith brought his family up there, and Brian Harkins, another one of our subjects, brought his family up there. And so it was, to me, it was a very fitting way to end the movie. But it was a challenge. I mean, it was definitely the most time I've ever spent on a movie in post-production,
Wow.
ever.
Wow.
Yeah, I think, leading, excuse me, leading up to it, getting all the people we interviewed to kind of sign on to do it was a challenge I wasn't ready for, because a lot of people, I mean, I go around and I speak about this all the time. I do podcasts, all this other stuff. And for me to talk about this is no big deal. Well, it is a big deal, but it's not a big deal. It doesn't bother me. And when I started reaching out to the people who were like, the people I definitely wanted to be part of this, there was a lot of, what are they going to ask? It's going to depend on what they're going to ask. And it took some convincing and some reassuring to get people who don't talk about this. Some do more now, to understand sort of we're not here to peel every secret of your life out and put it in the camera. We're here to try to help the greater good, because this project is bigger than all of us. And once they sort of got that, people started being more comfortable. And there was definitely some apprehension the day of filming, for each person. Every day, probably at least 2 of the people being filmed took me aside. I was like, I don't know if I could do this. And it took some reassuring, and it was humbling, because for me at this point, it doesn't faze me. I just go and do what I do. I talk about what needs to be talked about, but other people don't do that. And it brings you back. it brings you back. And so it was a challenge, but it was growth. It was growth for me. And it was just a great project to do.
Were you involved on every shoot, Keith?
I was there for the entirety of the filming. Yeah. And then some additional later on, we had to do some additional B-roll shots that I got to be part of. So it was a lot of fun.
I saw on on the website the one of the photos of you, I think, backing up a fire truck. You look like you're 19 or something.
I might be 45. I do have the saving grace of looking younger than I really am. But yes, when I was younger, I looked like a baby. And there are several pictures that people are like, "What are you, like 18?" I'm like, "No, I was 25." But yeah, there's some pretty young photos in the film.
So what's your vision? And this is to all three of you, whoever wants to answer. Your vision and your kind of your goal and your hopes for this documentary. Like, what's the overall mission and goal for this?
I think, for Scott and I, as filmmakers, it was, I think, what you do anytime you put, several years of your life into a project, which is you just want to tell a story that's going to connect with people. And, I have no doubt this movie will connect with people. At what level, we will see. I know it already has. I know that there is an audience, lined up ready for it. And I think, it has a lot of potential to, sort of spread through word of mouth, which, not every kind of film does that. So, I think, I think what we're really hoping for is for the movie to come out. We chose a distribution partner, Gravitas, because they, can bring us the widest release. It's on October 3rd. It's going to be everywhere you buy and rent movies. So, whether that's on iTunes or DirecTV or Redbox or whatever. I think also, we brought on Rob Riggle to narrate it. And, I think Scott and I, for a long time, thought that we should have someone who was local and from that area. But I think we ended up really falling in love with the idea of Rob because he does have such a broad appeal. And I think, he's the only person to be on both Saturday Night Live and Daily Show. And he's obviously, done all these comedic things like The Hangover. But I think people know him from Holy Moly and from Fox Football in the Morning and from, he's done some really great drama work in the last few years. And, but he's very authentic in that he's a veteran. He does, a lot of charitable work for veterans. And he also in recent years has really started to speak out on, as an advocate for mental health awareness. And, so the authenticity of having Rob on board was really special. And I think that'll help us, reach a broader audience as well.
Yeah, I would totally agree there.
Hopefully people get right away. It's not a cop, that's obviously you're used to seeing Rob in comedy, but no, actually, honestly, my favorite narrators are, the ones you least expect. And I think, having a voice that you've heard a million times, but you're usually associated with comedy, do this movie. I love that. My first movie, Tommy Lee narrated it, and it was such an unexpected choice, but I think it was, I loved it from the very beginning because it just was, so perfect. And I think Rob does a really great job. And I'm bummed that the actors are on strike right now because if they weren't, he'd be on this podcast right now. And, he's just as passionate about all of this stuff as we are.
I mean, I think that, for me, because of what I do, I always, when I said advocate, it was bringing awareness, right? Which I truly feel this film shares that, right? That it shares the mission of awareness. It brings awareness to a subject that a lot don't talk about. Even though we talk about it more, it's not spoken about as much as people like to think. But it also sort of brings what can be the beginning of a change. It's not just awareness, because awareness is great, but we need a change because people are aware that PTSD and suicide is happening, but people are still dying by their own hands. And so with this film, my hope is always that seeing, 14, 15 different people sharing vulnerability on a screen is going to get people to be able to show vulnerability in their private lives. They don't necessarily have to go on stage and talk about it. They don't got to get in front of a camera and talk about it, but maybe they'll pick up that phone. Maybe they'll call that doctor, maybe they'll call that therapist, their friend, their mother, whatever it is, and reach out for help. And they'll be able to see in real life, men and women sharing that vulnerability where they reached out for help and now their lives have gotten better, and showing that proof. And so my hope is, that, people out there, first responders or not, will find that courage to be able to reach out for help, to be able to change the culture, to be able to change that stigma in society that's like, well, I can't reach out for help because I'm not going to actually receive help. I'm not going to receive support. If we can start changing that mentality, people will be more apt to reach out for that help.
Oh, I'll just add, I mean, obviously what these guys said, but I think anytime you can speak or do something and you can just change or save one person's life, it's all worth it. And I think, hopefully through this film and these people that speak, that we can get to people of all ages and at least help one person, but hopefully help a lot more to make the greatest decision of their life to ask for help.
Beautiful. I'd love to hear from all three of you, maybe one particular story or one particular person that really stood out for you in this, and not to single out anyone else, but just something that really resonated with you and really was a powerful moment in the movie. Share a little story about what really resonated, what kind of pulled at your heartstrings.
I'll be honest. I'm pretty close to one of the people who interviewed, Brian Harkins, and we run a peer support group down here, and it's a Zoom based one down here in Massachusetts, and we're pretty close. We know quite a bit of each other's secrets. And during his interview, I was not expecting to see him get as emotional as he did. And I don't want to give away any Easter eggs, but it was, I mean, a lot of people had a lot of power behind what they shared. But for me, seeing someone that I have been through quite a bit with in life share what he did the way he did, it was one of the most powerful moments all that entire week. So I still hold on to it. I still kind of make fun of him for it in a brotherly love kind of way. And he has no idea what I'm talking about because, he does, but he's not, I don't think he's fully prepared for it, but it really stood out for me.
I think, obviously we had a lot of guys and we did have a few women in this, but one of the subjects, Jessie, she talked about, Christmas night, I'm pretty sure a car accident where there was a dead body and, her, I think now ex-husband was a first responder and, basically they get out, he sees what happens, gets back in the car, like everything, like nothing even happened. Like, let's go home, celebrate Christmas. And, I think they have a little kid in the car and, you're sitting there and, as we're watching this interview happen, you're trying to think Christmas is supposed to be fun and, we get presents and everybody's happy, but what these people, and not only just the first responders, but what their families have gone through during the time they were on the force and after, I wasn't aware of, it wasn't just them that their lives were affected. It's everybody living under their roof. It's, people at other jobs, like how one person's issues can affect so many others. And, hers of many. I mean, I think we could all just rattle off everybody that spoke, but, when you associated Christmas with, a major car accident and her ex gets in the car and like nothing happened, I was like, wow, I would struggle to give that answer,
And I think you bring up a good point about this whole documentary might be a huge key to open some doors to the general public about what the fire service and the first responder world's like. Like you talk about the family aspect of things. There's probably a lot of people that really don't understand the fire service or don't understand other first responder agencies and how they operate and the things they see on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, I think it's far greater than first responder world. I think this is going to be for the general public.
That was really eye-opening for me. I'd never really thought about sort of the systemic element to all of this, and that, the common theme between everyone we interviewed was that, their father was, a first responder and never brought anything home, never talked about it. His father was the same way. then they went to the military, and the first thing they said in the military was, leave this all here. Don't bring this home. Don't talk about it with anyone. And, so, as much as even you may realize that you want to talk about it or you should talk about it, it's just, like, in you and everything you've gone through in your whole life for a lot of these people whose families were also first responders to do what they did, to hold it in. So yeah, that was definitely probably the most educational part of it for me that I didn't realize. And, I think it's just not something that people think about, especially us here in Hollywood. It's like, there's no like family chain of characteristics that's being passed along in our careers in the same way that there are here. And that was a really eye-opening thing to see.
Was there any other stories, Corey, that you want to talk about?
I mean, it's impossible to single them out for me. They were all so powerful. And, my interview style is to have conversations. I don't write questions down, freaks people out. I went to journalism school. I've been interviewing people since I was a teenager, interviewed huge celebrities and I have conversations. And, so I look back on them all and I feel like they were just, beautiful conversations with new friends. And, I guess, I will just, single out Keith in the sense that he had, we had him on camera for the longest. We had him on camera a few times and he had to really dig into, a lot. Keith's gone through some things in his life, that weren't necessarily exactly connected to being a first responder, but we felt like we had to tell in this documentary because you don't know Keith if you don't know these stories, the death of his first wife and the near death of his second wife. And, so, Keith opening up to Scott and I about those and just, those were, not easy for him to do. And I'll forever be grateful for him to open up. And, I think it really helps you connect with Keith in this movie, even though maybe they're not necessarily about being a first responder.
I ask this in all my interviews. What's one question that I did not ask you yet that you wish I asked you?
It's always a tough one. And I will say this, Arjuna, and you'll get this, and Corey and Scott were there, so they got to experience it. Going back to the part where we had that big sit down dinner on one of the days of filming, that is crucial. And it mirrors the first responder life, especially the firehouse life, where we go through a bunch of shit during the day. We do our tour and a bunch of bad stuff happens, or we get very emotional, and we do what we have to do at the end of the day or dinner time, whatever. We sit down and we eat, right? We all sit down at that table as a family, and that's what we did. That was that day in particular was an incredibly taxing day on several people. And we all sat down. There was a lot of us, families, spouses, children, and all of us involved in production. And, we all sat down just like at the firehouse and we broke bread. We laughed, we busted balls, and, it was very reminiscent. It was so appropriate for what we were doing. And that's a real big takeaway from this. And I told Scott and Corey, I go, this is big. Mm-hmm. This is big. You sat down with these people and broke bread. This is huge. You've gained trust. And that was great. It was one of the biggest takeaways.
Yeah, probably a life-changing moment for both Scott and Corey.
Really was. One question that you could ask is, I'll put my producer hat on, which is, what can people do to help this movie?
Fantastic. Okay.
And the answer would be, like I mentioned earlier, like a movie like this, finds an audience through word of mouth. So, I know for me, I see a movie that I love and I just go straight to social media and, oh my God, Oppenheimer blew my mind, whatever it might be. I highly encourage that and, tag our movie. We're First Responders in Crisis on Instagram and Facebook. And as of today, we're on TikTok now as well. But I would say, even more importantly, like, movies, small independent movies now, much like movies that come out in the theaters, it's all really about like kind of opening weekend. So if we can, find a big audience for that opening weekend, then it's going to just, steamroll into a big release. So, if you're passionate about the same stuff as we've talked about on this podcast, and if you're here, you probably are. And if you like the movie, hopefully you do, we would love for anyone to help us just, especially in that first week of October, to spread the word, and hopefully we can build a big audience.
Fantastic. And there will be one public showing back home in Keystone. Is there any other public showings, or?
We're going to do one here in LA. It's at the Awareness Film Festival. It's kind of fun to do a festival screening as well, because you get a lot of just fans of film, fans of documentaries. So I'm excited. I think, as Keith mentioned, the screening that we're doing in Townsend, and it might sound odd to screen it at a high school, but it's the biggest theater we could find. And that's why we're there. And I think, that's a gift to everybody who, in that town, who gave us their stories and their time, and for them to get to see it in a room, which is always a really special experience. And also to, show all of the, people in that community what we made. And then the screening we'll do in LA will be a little bit more of something different, which would be an opportunity for, maybe people outside the first responder community to get an opportunity to see what we did with this documentary. I watch a ton of documentaries. Scott watches a ton of documentaries. We both make other documentaries, and, this one's unique. It's not, super flashy with, all kinds of animations and things like that. It's just got heart in it from the very, very, very beginning. The movie opens with, Keith's story of the first time he had a fatality at a fire when he was only 18, or not even 18 yet, I think. And so there's very few movies like that. And so I'm excited for anyone who just is curious about documentaries to watch this as well.
Very cool. A quick question back to Keith: how much of an impact did this have on your community? Coming in with producers and everything, any impact there, or was it kind of tightly knit just in the fire service? Producers coming into town, and there must be buzz through town.
It brought lots of business to those places. Scott and I, Scott made sure to show me all of the, all the fine food in Townsend. So that was awesome.
The fine food, yeah.
There must have been a buzz going around town about this, right? So.
Yeah, for sure. I think it was definitely kind of cool, especially at one of the locations we filmed, one of the like long standing restaurants we did, one day of shooting at. It was definitely really cool, and there was definitely sort of a buzz felt throughout the town. And during this time, I had gotten some phone calls from people being like, "Oh, hey, I heard you were in town, shooting a movie. That's kind of cool." And I don't know, that kind of hits you in a way that, especially given the subject matter of the film, you're not used to. And so it was definitely very cool.
Yeah. How about you, Scott? Anything?
Really just what those guys said. Anytime you can go back, obviously living in LA, it's quite a distance from Townsend. So to get to go back, Keith was saying, one of the restaurants, I was walking out to grab something from the car, and all of a sudden car drives by, and it's probably like 10:30 in the morning. I look at the person, they, drive a little bit, and then they pull back, and it's my fourth grade teacher. She puts in reverse, so just, puts life in perspective of small town America, that literally right time, right place. All of a sudden there's my fourth grade teacher that I haven't seen in years. We have a catch up moment in the parking lot of the Townsend House restaurant. Just made it that much more enjoyable. But, obviously I love where I'm from. Wouldn't change where I grew up, and anytime you can go back and do something there, it's great. I'm looking forward to go back, to the screening on that Wednesday. I'm looking forward to going to the high school football game on Friday, then flying back to LA on Saturday.
Beautiful. Well, it's been a real treat to get to know all three of you, and I'm super stoked to see this movie come to fruition and get into the hands of, like you said, millions around the world about mental health and the world of first responders. How can people, you mentioned a couple times how people can watch this, but maybe just a quick recap where they can find it, where they can watch it, where they can follow you on social, and any other little last minute nuggets on maybe a trailer or anything like that we can add.
Yeah, I think the best thing to do is to follow us on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok. We're First Responders in Crisis on all of those platforms. That you'll get all of the information that you need as far as where to find it and things like that. The screenings that we're going to be doing both in New England and back here in LA. And then on October 3rd, it will be anywhere you can buy or rent movies. So I think the biggest ones are iTunes and Amazon, but there's dozens of others as well. So and I believe that I'm going to break some news on your podcast that on September 27th they're going to do I think it might be iTunes exclusively, but they're going to do a weekend pre-sale discount where I think you can buy the movie for like $5.99 or something like that. So follow the socials and you can get that information. But we're really excited to be have it coming up so close.
Fantastic. Yeah, all that will be in the show notes for everyone to watch as well.
Thank you, and thank you again for having us. It's amazing that what you're out here doing with your podcast, and we're happy to be a part of it.
I appreciate it. Likewise. All right, Keith, one last message to all our listeners. What's it? One last message. Could be anything you want.
Always a pressure at the end of the show. I always tell people to try to find strength in trauma. And, it's not to always bring this back to it, but there's growth in this. And like I said earlier, a lot of the people involved in this project have had massive growth since being part of this project. And it's because a lot of us faced our trauma. And so finding strength in trauma is huge.
Yeah. Well, it makes us more resilient.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Scott, a message for you?
Pick up the phone and ask for help.
Yep.
That's it.
Amen.
So true. Yep. Thank you. Finish off with Corey.
I'm really surprised that Scott didn't say "win your mind, win your freedom."
I know.
Hold on. We got that. I mean,
there we go.
Oh, you got it on a t-shirt even. Nice.
Yeah.
Trademark?
That's true. Yeah.
Mine is "win your mind, win your freedom."
Yeah, but I'd much rather have somebody pick up the phone than talk about their mind, because you can't win your mind and win your freedom if you don't have your life. So
I like it. I like it.
Thank you again. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, AJ.
Appreciate it, guys.
Yep. Very looking forward to seeing this released. So
Thank
thanks,
you.
thanks everyone for listening. Until next time, stay well.
Thank you for tuning in to Beneath the Helmet. We hope that this podcast has provided you with valuable insights into the world of firefighters' health and wellness. Remember, caring for your physical, mental, and spiritual well-being is crucial to achieving optimal performance. Join us next time on Beneath the Helmet for more inspiring conversations. Until then, stay well.